Hello, my name is Charles Finkel. I'd like to invite you on a journey from summer to Seattle, a brief history of beer in the last 10,000 years. Before I tell you that history, I'd like to talk to you about my history. I was born in New York, but moved to Broken Arrow, Oklahoma when I was 4 years old. I love the land and to this day am an inveterate gardener. I excelled in history, in writing, and in art. I majored in art in college and managed a liquor store my senior year. I was so fascinated by the art surrounding wines, beers, and spirits that I decided to make a career of them. I moved to New York, went to work for Monsieur Henri Wines Limited, and learned everything I could about the subject. I won a contest, Best Salesman of the Year, and a trip to Spain. On other occasions, they sent my wife and me to visit vineyards in Switzerland, Germany, Austria, France, Spain, and I loved every minute of it. The following year, I founded my own company, Bonvin. We too represented wines from Europe, but specialized in small, family-owned, less well-known wines. Ultimately, we sold our European wines to the biggest market in America, California, and it was at the time that small, family-owned wineries were starting to sprout up in the Napa Valley, Sonoma County, and Mendocino. So we became the agent for Sutter Home, Dry Creek, Ficklin, Kenwood, Fetzer, and Ficklin. At the time we were selling wines in California then and representing those wines elsewhere, we discovered Saint Michel wines, then called American wine, but ultimately I converted to Washington State wine. They were, of course, from Washington State, but they just weren't labeled that way because the winery thought Washington State had a poor reputation for wines. We made the wine so successful that the company was purchased by a large New York Stock Exchange company that wanted to diversify their portfolio. They bought my company at the same time. My family and I moved from Houston to Seattle, and our purpose for being here was to be on a team that built what is now the historic Chateau Saint Michel in Woodinville, Washington. It has since become the largest Riesling producer in the world. After staying with that company for 4 years, I decided to start my own company again. And in that case, based on my love of beer, my passion for good beer, which was not satisfied with what I could buy in the market, I sought to represent the world's best brewers. Fortunately for me, no one had ever done it before, and I was fishing from the proverbial barrel. I represented the oldest brewery in Yorkshire, Samuel Smith, founded in 1758, and still making beer in slate squares that gave the beer a fantastic nutty flavor. The Eyinger Brewery in Bavaria started as a hotel in 1370. I'm the only Jewish person likely to speak to you today that represented a Catholic monastery that brewed beer in Belgium. And certainly not least, the Lindemans Farm Brewery in Belgium that has since 1860 made spontaneously fermented wheat beer. It was during the time that I owned Merch in the Van, MDV, that we decided to start our own brewery, we being Roseanne, my wife, and I. And we chose a place to do that in Seattle at the historic Pike Place Public Market. We ran the Pike Brewery from 1989 until Roseanne's death in 2020 and sold it at that time. To commemorate our experience, both of us have recently been elected along with 10 other people, to the inaugural class of the American Craft Beer Hall of Fame. We did it all because of such a fantastic history that dates back thousands of years. The agricultural revolution that converted humans from hunter-gatherers to farmers occurred in Mesopotamia, thus Sumer to Seattle. Sumer is a city-state in Mesopotamia, or was, and there brewing became an art form. It was women that brewed the beer. We later called them brewsters, and they continue to brew the beer for at least the next several thousand years, at least until the 18th century, when the Industrial Revolution came about in England and brewing moved from a craft industry to a factory industry, with big factories brewing beer in London, in Birmingham, in Munich, in Vienna, in Paris, in Rome, in all the great capitals of Europe. Beer came to America on the Mayflower in 1620. In the log of the Mayflower, we could not go for further search, our victuals being spent, especially our beer. Our Constitution was signed in a tavern, and lager beer became the standard of the world after a Frenchman, Louis Pasteur, of vaccination fame, wrote a book about yeast, and particularly isolated bottom fermented yeast that would pave the way for American light lager beers. Unfortunately, the bad news is that we are one of the few countries that had prohibition. So while half the states were dry by 1920, the whole country went dry from 1920 to 1933, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed a bill that would allow beer to be sold. In more recent times, I started selling beer in 1978. At the time, America had 2 craft breweries. We introduced many of the classic brewing styles, many of which I had to recreate from historic products that I'd heard of, like porter and oatmeal stout. And we now have 10,000 craft breweries in the United States, making every conceivable style and taste in beer. And I'm very proud to have played the part and been part of the history from Sumer to Seattle. Thank you.